Are fish like this anorexic? Is it normal for a fish to have its bones on the outside of its body? And what about this fish? Is it wearing a vest? Well, when we talk about whether or not an animal has an endoskeleton or an exoskeleton, things aren't always black and white. These fish all have skeletons, but some are more on the outside than others. So let's get ready to rule the water and take a closer look at fish skeletons. First, let's talk about the vast majority of fish that you probably think of when you hear the word fish. These fish belong to a class of animals called osteichthyes, which means bony fish. The word osteichthyes comes from two Greek words, ostion, meaning bone, and ichthys, meaning fish. Bony fish make up more than half of all vertebrates and the vast majority of fish that we eat. They have a skull, which surrounds and protects the brain, and a vertebral column, also known as the spine or backbone, which runs down the length of the body and is made up of many small bones called vertebrae. All these bones are connected together to make one flexible structure, and they protect important structures inside the body like the spinal cord. In addition, bony fish have ribs that run from the spine to the skull or to the shoulder girdle. The ribs form a protective cage around the body and provide support. Of course, all these bones are located inside the body, so that would make them part of an endoskeleton. Let's take the common perch as an example. It's a bony fish found in lakes and rivers in the northern hemisphere. It belongs to the class Osteichthyes, which means that it has an endoskeleton made out of bone. Now, while the skeleton of a fish is important for our dinner plates, it's not really what people are referring to when they say that fish have bones on the outside of their bodies. What they're really talking about are the scales of the fish. Fish scales are small, flat structures that overlap each other and cover the body of most fish. They help protect the fish from injury and help reduce friction in the water. In some species of fish, like the perch, these scales are small and flexible, while in other species, like the gar, the scales can be much larger and rigid. In fact, these scales are so tough, they've even earned the fish the nickname dinosaur fish. Gar are often called dinosaurs because their scales are so tough. It would be like getting poked by a bunch of tiny javelins. But are these scales an exoskeleton? Well, no. The reason why? They're not a true skeletal structure. Sure, they might look like armor, but they don't serve the same function as an exoskeleton. Exoskeletons provide support and protection for the body by being on the outside of the body. That means they need to be strong enough to hold up the entire weight of the animal. In order to do that, they need to be rigid and inflexible. But fish scales don't need to hold up the whole fish. They just need to protect the fish from minor cuts and abrasions while it's swimming around. To accomplish that, they can be thin, flexible, and overlap each other. You can think of them more like fingernails or toenails. They're made of keratin, which is the same material that makes your hair and nails. So they're definitely not an exoskeleton. But wait, there's more. There are even some fish that have both super rigid armor on the outside of their bodies and an endoskeleton made out of bone. Take sturgeons, for example. Sturgeons are a type of ray-finned fish found in large rivers and lakes in the northern hemisphere. There are 27 species of sturgeon alive today, and they can grow pretty big. The beluga sturgeon is the largest freshwater fish in the world and can reach lengths of over 6 meters and weigh more than 1,000 kilograms. That's bigger than a polar bear. Sturgeons have been around for a very long time, and fossils of early sturgeons have been found that are over 180 million years old. That's almost the age of the dinosaurs. Sturgeons have hard armor-like scales called scutes covering their bodies. These scutes are made out of bone and are fused together to form a protective shell. This shell is especially pronounced on the head and neck of the sturgeon and can be up to 4 inches thick. And as I mentioned before, this armor doesn't provide support for the rest of the body. The rest of the sturgeon's body is supported by its endoskeleton made out of bone. So is this armor an exoskeleton? Well, not exactly. First of all, it's not on the outside of the body, it's embedded in the skin. Second, it's not made out of chitin like most exoskeletons are. It's made out of bone, which is the same thing that the endoskeleton is made out of. So what is this armor called? Well, scientists call it dermal armor because it's a part of the skin. While it does serve the same purpose as an exoskeleton, providing protection for the body, it's not an exoskeleton. It's just a specialized structure of the skin. So what about sharks? Do sharks have an exoskeleton? Well, sharks don't have any bones at all. Their skeleton is made out of cartilage, the same stuff that's in your nose and ears. Cartilage is lighter and more flexible than bone, which helps sharks be more maneuverable in the water. But sharks don't have rigid armor either. Instead, they have tiny tooth-like scales called denticles covering their bodies. These denticles are made out of dentin, which is the same substance that makes up the bulk of your teeth. Each denticle is embedded in a socket like a tooth, and they're all pointed towards the tail of the shark. As you might expect, this gives the shark a rough, sandpaper-like feel. So are these denticles an exoskeleton? Well, no. Even though they're on the outside of the body and made out of a hard material, they're not a skeletal structure. They're more like really tough skin flaps. And what's more, sharks have lost their armor over time. Millions of years ago, sharks used to have armor like other fish, but over time, they lost it. Scientists think this happened because the armor was just too heavy and cumbersome for the shark's active lifestyle. So sharks evolved to be naked. Well, almost naked. Okay, so now we know that most fish don't have an exoskeleton. They have an endoskeleton. But what about these guys? These extinct animals were called placoderms. Placoderms lived in the oceans during the Devonian period, which was from about 419 to 359 million years ago. Fossils of placoderms have been found all over the world, and there were many different types of placoderms. Some were small, only a few centimeters long, while others were huge, reaching lengths of more than 6 meters. The name placoderm means armored fish, and these fish were indeed covered in armor. Their armor was made out of very thick, bony plates and covered the head and front part of their bodies. The rest of their bodies were more flexible and had smaller scales. So were these armored fish wearing armor? Well, yes, kind of. Their armor was on the outside of their bodies, but it wasn't an exoskeleton. The reason why? It was connected to their endoskeleton. The bony plates were actually part of their ribs, which were just way bigger and thicker than normal ribs. Their ribs formed a protective cage around the front of their bodies, protecting them from injury. But this armor was heavy and bulky and didn't leave much room for flexibility. So the placoderms evolved to have smaller, more flexible scales on the rest of their bodies. Placoderms weren't the only fish to evolve this way. Many other types of fish have also evolved to have both armor and regular scales. For example, there's lungfish, mudskippers, leaffish, and sunfish. So while it might seem like some fish have bones on the outside of their bodies, that's not really true. Their armor is part of their endoskeleton. So let's take a moment to review everything we've learned. When we talk about whether an animal has an endoskeleton or an exoskeleton, it's important to be precise with our language. Most fish have an endoskeleton made out of bone. Some fish have hardened scales or armor on the outside of their bodies, but this armor is not an exoskeleton. It's just a specialized structure of the skin or part of their endoskeleton. Only a few types of fish, such as the placoderms, have both armor and regular scales. And even then, the armor is not an exoskeleton. It's just a thickened part of their endoskeleton. So while it might seem like some fish have bones on the outside of their bodies, that's not really the case. They're just fish with fancy armor. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please subscribe and leave a comment below. And remember, keep curious.